Uh, Thank you for joining us for today's webinar conducted by ISACA Sri Lanka chapter. I'm Silakshi Javardhana, Director Memberships. Before starting the program today, I want to remind you that when registering, please make sure you enter your name, email address, and your membership number correctly so it's easy for us to add CPE points. You will be awarded one CPE point for this session, and CPE points will be awarded based on your registration details and your attendance records. If you have any questions to be asked from the speaker, please type in the QA window. We'll take up those questions after the presentation. Uh, so today's topic is Digital Trust, a board level perspective. Speaker here with us today is Mr. Mukul Mathur. He is the founder and CEO of Zero T Plus Technologies LLP. He was in the senior leadership team of IBM for more than 29 years. He holds an MBA in finance and marketing and BE, which is electronics and communication. He also have recently completed the postgraduate certification in cybersecurity from MIT Expro and holds CISA certification by ISACA. Over to you, Mukul, to start the session.
Thank you, Silakshi. I hope everybody can hear me. Right. Okay, so look, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to ISACA Sri Lanka chapter for talking to everyone today. I hope you find this useful, and I'm looking forward to some interaction, questions, comments to learn and benefit from at the end of the session. Like Lakshmi mentioned, I do some work of my job in IBM was I used to run the cybersecurity business for IBM for Asia Pacific, and subsequently I've been working on consulting work on cybersecurity, risk governance, and IT risk management as a topic. And so I thought this is a very good topic to take on and share some thoughts on, because this pretty much encompasses everything, as a whole perspective on what we do in terms of IT risk and IT risk management and using IT for business growth. So with that preamble, let me just share very quickly what we are planning to cover today. I have broken it up into three key parts. One is we'll talk about digital trust, what it means, and what a digital ecosystem really means. And then we'll deep dive into the core of the topic, which is governing bodies, boards, and how they should look at digital trust for their own organizations. What does it mean to have that incorporated in the data into the business? We will look at ISACA's digital trust ecosystem framework as one of the methods to execute on this thought process. And then, of course, we'll summarize. Hopefully, we'll have some time for Q&As. Like Lakshmi mentioned, please do share your questions in the chat box or comments, and then we take it on towards the end. What's a good way to start a session like this is to start with a story. You can see here some pictures and some news items. I'm sure many of you easily recognize this. This is what happened in July earlier this year. Just to give a quick recap, this is when CrowdStrike applied a patch to their software. And wherever there were Windows servers above a particular version, those servers suddenly came down and completely disrupted the operations of many companies. Some of you may have experienced this firsthand or would have known organizations which were impacted and or customers which were impacted because of the organizations that were impacted. Now, when I picked this up, because if you see, some of the comments and pictures here, I picked up one particular element of this, which is what happened with Delta Airlines. So when this happened, Delta Airlines completely stopped, had to stop all of their operations. Uh, the passenger the passengers were stranded in the airports wherever they were, and there were multiple delays. I mean, there were cancellations, delays, and Delta could not recover for a very long time. I think it was a couple of days for them to fully recover, but even partial recovery took a lot more time, and there was a lot of inconvenience caused to customers. And so you can see here, in the messaging. So CrowdStrike obviously faces an onslaught of legal actions. A lot of their customers, including Delta, is suing them. In return, CrowdStrike is pointing finger back to Delta, saying, "Hey, look, my software failed. So what? You should have had something else to manage your downtime, and you should have had some alternatives to do it. Your customer problem is not mine." The customers of Delta are suing Delta because they said that your outage was far more than many other companies that were impacted. They were impacted, but they quickly recovered, and you couldn't do it. And uh, Delta even went on to say, "Look, this seems, this happened only with Windows, so why isn't Microsoft a part of all this discussion?" And so it should be made a party, because if we had not used Windows, then maybe this would not. And the reason I'm painting this scenario is that you can see here, different people trying to, a huge amount of inconvenience happened, and this was not a cyber strike or a hacking. This was a plain and simple IT operational item, and it created so much of disruption across. And so, if you think about it, whose expectation was breached here? You think about it, and these are typically expectations that customers have of their service providers. Quality definitely was breached, because for Delta or other organizations, CrowdStrike should have done the quality check, and/or Microsoft should have done the quality check, and therefore they didn't do that properly. The resilience was obviously breached, because there was no alternative, there was no ability to come back up, there was no alternative process. They had no mechanism of issuing boarding passes outside of the system to do this. Uh, there was the issue of uh, ethics and integrity, because there was a lot of ill will about, and by the way, related is transparency and honesty, because there was a lot of miscommunication, there was a lot of black box. People didn't know what is really happening, when things will finally come out, and so on and so forth. And availability was compromised. Probably here, security and privacy was not compromised, but pretty much any expectation that a customer have from a service provider was compromised. And I think, when the reason I took this example and to share what really happened is, I think this brings in very well the whole context of trust as a whole, because you trust a particular vendor or a particular service provider. I mean, people trusted Delta Airlines for a good journey. Delta trusted Microsoft and CrowdStrike for strong product and technology, and so on and so forth. So there's an element of trust across the supply chain, across the ecosystem, which was breached. And whenever the trust manifests itself in a digital world, that's where we use the term digital trust. So let's talk about digital trust and its ecosystem. So what is digital trust? If you now think about it in the context of the example that we looked at, digital trust, it centers around relationships. So it is the same as trust in the real world, except that this is manifested in all the digital interactions that happen between a customer and the service provider. This is not just the financial relationship. So this is not about the financial. The example I took is not about the financial relationship. It is about the service, the ability to continue to provide that service when some things go wrong, the how you respond to that crisis. All of that comes into play when it comes to trust or digital trust. And it is not about cybersecurity and privacy. I mean, we saw again in the previous example, it was not about cybersecurity or privacy. It was just about the faith that was breached in the whole execution and providing of the service. And so now, if you look at in that context, the definition that ISACA has of digital trust, and I highlighted some keywords, I'll come to that. It says it's a what digital trust is the confidence in the integrity of the relationships, interactions, and transactions amongst providers and consumers within an associated digital ecosystem. So it is the integrity, and this integrity is a little bit different from our traditional definition of integrity in cybersecurity or in IT, where we talk about integrity. This has a moral issue to it. It has an ethics and a morality issue to it, as to are you really honest about making sure that the relationship is managed in a positive way and a positive outcome. The second part of this definition is that this includes the ability of people, organizations, processes, information and technology to create and maintain a trustworthy digital world. And what two aspects come out of this? One is that this is not about just information and technology. So this is not an digital trust is not about saying, hey, look, I have a very secure, I do good work on cybersecurity and privacy, so my digital trust coefficient should be high or my maturity should be high. No, this is about not just the information and the technology, but how about our processes, our people, our interactions, all interactions that we do, our responses to the customer, their experience with us, all of that builds or depletes their trust or faith in our organization. And so that's why this is far more holistic in nature than just saying, hey, look, I already do cybersecurity, I already do privacy, then why am I talking about digital trust? Because it covers a much larger sphere than this. I saw one video, and they talked about this book from Stephen Covey, and I think the book is Speed of Trust, and one of the key core of that book or the message from Stephen Covey is that trust basically leads to two things. It reduces cost and increases speed. So it's just that you need a trusted, the more trusted the relationship, the more trusted the process, the more trusted the organization, the better you will do on cost, and the better you will do on the speed and your efficiency of the system. So let's look at what therefore the expectation, or what a trustworthy ecosystem will look like. Very similar to some of the things that we looked at in the first instance about customer expectations, but this is more about what would the characteristics of a digitally trustworthy ecosystem would be. There would be a very high level of quality. So you would have consistent quality repeated every time you have an interaction. So you will always have good quality. You will have security and privacy, of course, because you would trust some personal information or some financial information that you want to make sure that is good. So a trustworthy ecosystem would have that. It would have high reliability. It would be available when you want to use it. If it gets disrupted, it will come back quickly. It will have ethics and integrity. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, because this comes in as a very different thought process, or an additional thought process to just saying, look, it is factual, but it also has to have the moral compass of making sure that it is doing the right thing by you, as a customer, uh, and not leading you to something which is potentially not in your best interest. It will have transparency and honesty. So you would, if you need to know why something was offered to you or sold to you or recommended to you, what was behind it, and so you can understand. And if there are disruptions, if there are fallbacks, then what's the curative, what's happening, and all of that. And last but not the least, the confidence. The confidence that every time you will interact, your confidence is high that this is correct. I mean, let's take another example. I mean, when you go, let's say you're walking through, uh, you're trying to do walking through a passport, or the airport, and the person there is checking your identity. When you show your passport, there is an implicit trust that your pass at the time of issuance of your passport, the passport authority did all the validation. So if you have a passport, I am quite sure that's what who you are, because I can look at the passport and verify. So there is inherent trust. Now, if you're not trusting the passport giver, then you would not be able to further validate whether I am the person who's holding that passport. So that's an example again of where you need to have high confidence and high trust on the provider to make sure that you can use that information in a valid manner. Is this just about doing the right thing and qualitative elements? No. I picked up a few data points and I wanted to share here. This is a report. This is a KPMG survey. I think of about 1,800 odd senior leaders. This is 2022, so a little dated, but nevertheless still very relevant. About what would be the benefits and expectations of a digital trust ecosystem, and you can see there's a direct benefit to bottom line. It improves profitability, there's better customer retention, there is increase in customers, strong commercial, so repeat, strong relationships, and it's also a driver of innovation. So once you have trusted relationships, you can co-create and work with customers for better innovation. And then on the other right hand side, you can see there's clearly lower likelihood of penalties, which obviously is a great one, but also overall increase in share price of the customer, growth in market share, and better employee retention. So all of these in the survey came out as potential benefits and expectations. So this is what KPMG came up with. Uh, I also put together, something that is there in ISACA. So ISACA does a survey which is called the State of Digital Trust. There is a recent report of 2024, and it highlights both the provider perspective of having, from provider perspective, the benefits of digital trust as well as the consequences of digital trust. And this is a very good survey. I mean, almost about 5,800 odd. Again, members were surveyed, and Asia as well represented here. It's about 23% or 24% is Asia respondents. So it's not just somewhere else. It is also very relevant to our geographies, and you can see positive reputation, more reliable data, of course, but more importantly, from a bottom line perspective, stronger customer loyalty, faster innovation, higher revenue are clear benefits, and consequences by just extension is reputation decline, more privacy breaches, more cybersecurity incidents, and last but not, I mean, if you go down the list, slower ability to innovate. So just completely contrast to the fact that if you don't focus or you don't build on your digital trust, you are likely to lose out. So there are going to be a clear will share some more data points from this as a part of this presentation. If it is also good, why isn't everybody doing it? And there are. I think it's an evolving concept. Uh, we lot of people started with cyber security, etc. There is digital innovation. There is build up happening on this, but again in the survey in the ISACA report, they did the survey and they tried to identify what were the reasons or what are the obstacles that people face in attaining digital trust, and lack of skills and trainings, lack of leadership turbine. And I'll just focus a little bit on this. Is that first of all, for anything to happen, it requires the senior most leadership focus and commitment. And which is why in today's topic, we'll talk a little bit about boards and governance and senior leadership roles. So they need to have the buy-in. They need to see why this is important for the organization and then roll it out internally. But more importantly, in a thing or an activity like digital trust, which is across the organization, which basically requires multiple functions and multiple stakeholders in the organization to play a part. Because anyone who is not doing it the way uh, it should be done, ethically, morally, efficiently, customer focused, any interaction which is not happening with any stakeholder would result in a reduction in our trustworthiness. So when you have something which is so broad across the organization, what happens is, like they say, if it is everybody's job, then nobody is doing it. And so for something like this to succeed, not only the senior leadership needs to be very committed and focused on getting this done, but they also need to then make sure that is an assigned responsibility, there are the right measurements, there are the right management systems and controls to make sure that this can be done. And you can see some of the additional bullet points uh, on the right hand side. I mean, only 36% respondents said that their senior leadership team was focused on this. Only 12% said that the organization had a staff role dedicated to this. So there was nobody for the remaining 78%. There was no one really responsible for that. Only 19% had the board of directors you having this as a priority, and so on and so forth. So really the issues start with board focus, putting accountability, sufficient collaboration. And then, of course, comes the point about then allocating it the right budget, resources, and so on and so forth. So not suffocating it by cutting the oxygen or not giving it sufficient oxygen, but following up that commitment, but providing all the resources that it needs. In today's world, I cannot make a presentation without using the word generative AI in a presentation. So I thought uh, I will use that here in the context of digital trust. And the reason I'm using this here is uh, while everything around us, everything in our business is going to cause changes in our digital trustworthiness with our customers, either positive or negative. So whatever changes, new products, etc. But I think generative AI has a far more multiplied effect because of the way it interacts with our customers and people at large. It obviously gives us huge opportunities. It gives us, we can enhance customer experiences. I mean, we can customize it to their likes, their preferences, and so on. So that would have a positive impact on our digital trustworthiness. We can improve efficiency. We can improve innovation. All of that will help us have a positive impact in our digital trustworthiness. But at the same time, a lot of these models uh, at organizational level, we have data privacy concerns. We don't know whether all of the information that we are capturing or the customer is sharing is securely shared. Are we regulating it well enough? uh, we know we've read about biases and whether and fairness. So whenever we are interpreting and we are sharing a recommendation, is it truly unbiased and fair, or there are some inherent biases that have crept in by the way of the training that it has gone in, that could harm the customer and reduce our trustworthiness? Is there transparency and accountability? Can we show, can we demonstrate how this the AI is working? And of course, there could be malicious players who could exploit the AI that we deploy through deepfakes and misinformation. And again, if we are trying to use generative AI in our products and in our organizations with obviously the right intent of improving the experience of customers and improving our digital trustworthiness, we as senior leaders or governing bodies need to prioritize on data privacy. So we should not lose or have a breach that opens up for regulatory action. We should address the bias issue, make sure we are using trusted models. We are constantly monitoring them for potential bias creep-ins. We should ensure transparency and ethical AI. So there is, if as we go and deploy, and I don't think it is an if question, it's the when and how question. Organizations will deploy AI and the future Gen AI in a lot of their customer interactions in some shape or form, and therefore the direct impact of that on digital trust is something that senior management needs to constantly monitor. Let's look at on that point then on governing bodies and digital trust, and what is the role that they play and how can they act responsibly when it comes to bringing in a culture of digital trust in the organizations. One of the best approaches is to take a balance card approach to digital trust. Again, I like this very much because it kind of uh, establishes the fact that it is an any initiative that requires to be monitored, measured, controlled, and managed. And so we should look at it from different elements, the financial elements, where we should possibly measure how it is helping us in reducing costs, better compliance, better governance and management, better ROI. We should look at its impact on customers. How is it strengthening our relationships? Are we getting repeat business? Is our brand loyalty improving? Is our product and service availability and our quality improving for our customers? And is there a better support during negative events? I mean, like again going back to the example we started with. So if something goes wrong, are we able to do better by way of the trusted actions that we have initiated internally? Through the actions that we initiate, have we optimized? Are we able to optimize better? Is our knowledge and skills better? Is our security, privacy, compliance better? Uh, have we reduced our reaction times when it comes to again bad incidents? And again, on the growth side, all of this will result for us in growth. So has it resulted in increased market share, sales, revenues, profits, and our overall enterprise value, as a market value of our organization. So a good way to manage. Uh, if we look at so how governing bodies should foster data. So what are the big roles the governing bodies play in those? So fundamentally two things. First is they need to define the culture, ethics, and behavior. Now, organizations are are beings in a way, because they have some inherent values, beliefs, culture, in which manifests in everything that they do. So for example, I mean, security or privacy. So privacy, if there's a culture of maintaining privacy, that culture has to be prevalent across the organization. So it's not just in the tools and the technology, but as a culture, we greatly value the privacy information, and at individual levels, every employee is focused on it. So different things emerge, in the culture. And then at the governing body level, we need to make sure that they provide or they enable that the teams down the line have all the tools, funding, resources that they require to execute or to deploy that culture. I mean, just make. I mean, the first part allows or the first part requires the governing bodies to make a statement as to what kind of culture, what kind of ethics, what kind of behavior they expect. The second part ensures that they provide whatever needs is needed to be executed for doing so, and it requires on prioritization of funding, digitally enabling those investments, and everything. Now, more importantly, all of this, this approach must include transparency and compliance to legal, contractual, and other compliance requirements. So while we define the culture, ethics, and behavior, we have to make sure that it is in line with the compliance requirements. So the governing bodies have a very important role, because right from the top, they define what kind of culture, ethics, behavior they are expecting, and then they provide the necessary resources to enable that. Uh, Again, this is also a very good set of inputs. You'll find that in the ISACA guidelines. But what are the digital trust principles for boards and governing bodies? And it's broken down into two parts. You will notice the first one is, what should the board do? Right? What is it that they should do to for digital trust? And second is, what should the board expect from the management? And these are two distinct things. I mean, the board has a role and the management has a role to ensure that they provide to the board what they need. So let's quickly go through each one of them and systems thing. So I'll go into each one of them in a little bit of detail in that. But so let's start with first, systems thinking. So this is principle number one, right? So systems thinking is all about taking a holistic approach. So it is not that, the board says, hey, look, for me, digital trust is just security and privacy, or it is not having any breaches. It is about everything in the organization that connects and customer experience. And so that systems thinking is very, very critical to this. If you see the graphic on the right, this is a systemic chart, and we'll again, some of the components we will talk about when we talk about in the framework. But say, take for example, cloud services is part of technology. Now something happens there. If the cloud services go down for some reason, which again is, I'm just referring to the example, then the technology goes down, and then uh, it could lead to a change in trust, right? It could go lower or it could go higher depending on what happened there. On the bright side, if uh, if there is in the supply chain or in the stakeholders do a positive impact or give a positive response to the customer interaction, this could go higher in terms of the trust level. So there is systemic view, there's a holistic view uh, to the whole approach to digital trust. It can't be just one aspect of this which says, hey, I've taken care of vulnerabilities, or I've taken care of breaches, so I've taken care of digital risk. No, it has to be the supply chain, the services, the ecosystem, the stakeholders, and the domains, and which we'll talk about, around culture, human factors, etc., etc. Right. The second principle is risk governance, right? So this is really about the fact that boards should understand the risk and benefits of digital trust, and this is more in context. So this is not generic. This is more in context of the organization itself. They need to communicate and enforce a risk appetite and also how much risk do you want to take, how much tolerance do you have, and what are the various so they need to generate a risk register, they need to assign appropriate authority levels and escalation procedures for risk, and they need to associate the digital risk, trust risk with the business risk. So if a business risk occurs, then what is the impact on the digital trust elements and vice versa. So how are the two related and linked with each other? Third principle is awareness. This is not, and we'll talk about the organization awareness, but this is at the board level awareness. So the board needs to be very aware. They need to take help of third-party consultants or experts, as required to make sure that they are consistently aware of digital trust, the technology, the process, the changes, the thought process in enforcing digital trust in their organizations, and continuously adjust that approach based on what is happening in the market to that, right? The next one, which is, so these three, the first three are really about the governing board responsibility, the systemic thinking, the risk governance, and the awareness. Then to implement this, the board expects the management to go put this into execution. And big part of that is choosing a methodology or a framework. Uh, uh, there are different frameworks. There are some. This particular slide talks about what the considerations of that framework are. It should be open, flexible, and aligned with various industries, models, and standards. It should be tailorable and should be holistic in nature. Uh, Now, ISACA obviously has a very comprehensive framework. We'll talk briefly about it in the next section, but that's not the only framework. I've seen World Economic Forum has a framework. So there are a few other approaches to that. The management can choose to pick whatever framework works best for them, but make sure that then they use that to manage and report to the board on the progress of the digital trust initiatives that they have implemented. And then the last principle is around risk management. This is really again from the management for the management to execute. The board in the risk governance piece already defined what the risk appetite is, and so the management is now identifying the processes, management processes, and identifies those risks and reports them to the board from time to time based on the likelihood and what is the response that they want to plan, and what decisions, risk-based decisions, and whether they are in line with the risk governance guidelines that the board established for them. Overall, if you look at governance of enterprise digital trust from a board perspective, and at the high level, you see the enterprise governance comprising of corporate and business governance of information technology and risk governance and compliance. I think many of you are very familiar with the overall enterprise governance. The key point here is that the digital trust is embedded across the entire governance process. So it is not just a part of IT governance or just one part of risk governance. It is part of every element of the enterprise, and so that's why you see that comment which says that it should be embedded by design. So the concept is now that digital trust governance or digital trust should be embedded by design in all of the governance elements so that when we are governing, we see the impact or cover all the elements that affect digital governance. And within the digital trust governance, there are a bunch of items that the factors that need to be looked at. The integrity, here the integrity is more about data integrity, etc., because there is already a point on confidence, reliability. Uh, there is there is there is also the element of resilience, there's an element of security and privacy. So all of these factors constitute the governing elements of digital trust, which should be across the enterprise governance framework. Okay, one of the things that ISACA recommends, it may or may not be possible because again, the perspective is different from large organizations versus small medium organizations. But there is a recommendation to say organizations could consider a separate digital trust committee. So other than the other governing committees that you have, in the organizations, organization could consider a digital trust committee which looks at digital trust in a holistic manner. Obviously, this should report directly to the board, but but there is a good chance that some of this is not possible. So the alternative is that this be a part, or it could be part of another committee. So for example, a risk committee or an IT committee or an audit or a governance committee of some nature. But the focus needs to be on digital trust across the organization. So if putting a separate committee is not possible, which may be the case in many organizations, then it could be a subcommittee, but with a very specific focus on digital trust. Okay, so we covered a little bit about what digital trust is, why it is important, uh, why the governance and the board has a key role, and what principles they should follow to do so. Now we look at the third element of this, which is bringing it home in terms of execution, which is where the management comes in and uses. I'm going to cover very briefly the digital trust ecosystem framework of ISACA. Uh, the framework is basically, I mean, one of the things that immediately come to mind, everybody is, oh my God, another framework, right? I mean, don't we have enough frameworks and all? But this was basically designed to work with existing frameworks. So it should be complementary. It would be complementary to existing frameworks in the organization. I mean, many of you probably already are using COVID 5 or some other similar framework in the organization for your IT governance, etc. But this will complement that to bring in a holistic view, which is what we have been talking about, for your digital trust execution. The one of the, I mean, some of the key benefits of using a framework approach, of course, is, it saves time. More importantly, it helps you get to some level of maturity scoring. So it helps you measure it a little better, and so it's not ambiguous. And so you can benchmark it, you can check its progress, and also you can compare it with other like organizations or within the industry, and also ask for a third party validation, which all of you already know is the better way to establish credibility in the market. The key thing, the terms, just very quickly, I will cover here and then we'll go down here. It focuses, like I said, on nodes. So the nodes at the high level are so we already know people, process, technology. It adds in the organizational element. So those are the nodes. So it brings in all of that together. So people, process, technology, and organization. And it is showing here in the three-dimensional view here is the domains which connect the two nodes. So for example, culture connects or influences people and organization. Direction and monitoring, uh, influences the processes and the organization. human factors uh, are linking the people and the technology elements, and so on and so on. So those are what in the DTF framework are called as domains, and then they further break it down to actions, etc., which I'll show you in the very quickly. Here is the hierarchy. So there is the domain, and then which basically defines and describes the dependencies between nodes. The domain breaks down into trust factors, so factors that define the trust in that element. Practices that details the explains and details the trust factors. Then it goes down to activity, which is the actual actions and steps that happen in the, and of course then the outcome. How does this look if you break it down further? Uh, this is a little bit of an eye testing chart, but I just wanted to show it as a comprehensive view. So as you can see, the four nodes: organization, process, people, technology, and the middle boxes on the left are the domains. So let's say, for example, we take let's say organization and people. So we say culture. So the culture, is the domain which helps in managing the culture, creating a digital trusted cultural environment, managing skills and competencies. So that's the culture as a domain. You could pick up something else, for example, process, which is between process and technology. So enabling support, managing technology services, managing development, managing, etc. And then on the right hand side is a blow up of one of the domains, which is say culture. You can see the sub boxes for trust factors. So in culture, for example, the manage culture trust factor, or create and manage digital trust culture environment, manage skills. So those are the trust factors. And then the trust factor is further broken down into practices, and practice is broken down into activity. So it goes hierarchically like that, and you can the management can then define for each of the activity the outcomes, the key controls, the KPIs, KRIs. So very much a very structured way of making real the digital trust guidance that the organization wants to follow. So to that extent, this is an extremely detailed and a very comprehensive framework. This is not a very old framework. I think this was announced sometime towards the end of 2022. So it is fairly recent. There may, but again, there is a lot of information on ISACA website on this in terms of training and implementation guidelines, etc. But I think it's a very structured way. There are other frameworks, like I said, but this is a pretty reasonable one. One of the questions that I was wondering about, and I maybe some of you, so how do you so what's the measure? I mean, we already looked at the framework and we looked at some KPIs, etc. But a lot of that is also related to customer experience and so on and so forth. So it's not necessarily all very quantitative in nature. I mean, it's not a straight number. So amongst the different ways in which it is measured, again, this survey from Isaka kind of showed us that uh, customer satisfaction surveys, uh, our ability to measuring issues, our response to issues, satisfaction to those issues is one way of testing for trustworthiness, and so on and so forth. How much repeat business we are getting is another measure. Monitoring patterns in customer behavior, positive, negative ratings, customer recommendation surveys, all of that, all of those can help us, do that. This is from the customer side of it. Internally, if you want to measure, we can review trust-related practices. We can do customer research. We can benchmark against similar advice. So there are ways in which we can measure some of the not some of we can measure the various activities and trust factors that we want to deploy in our organization. Again, these measures like anything else, take us through different capability levels, initial to optimizing, managed, defined, quantitatively managed. I'm not going to read through again. This is all details, but as logic will tell us, these are progressive based on our degree of implementation, based on our monitoring and managing of the trust factors. This is the maturity journey. So you start with initial, which is high level capability assessment, then you do, refined analysis, and then you start to go into the advanced levels where you start to branch into the activities and actually do as is versus target monitoring and so on and so forth. So the maturity journey is like any other framework that you would go and implement. Some key considerations for governing boards when they are implementing this. Again, like I said, this is holistic. It is not copy paste. It is to be specific to the organization. This is not just an IT. It has to bring in an element of clear element of business and business environment and importance of visibility. Uh, the- there is a need for a risk register so that we can manage the risk. uh, there has to be a risk guidance and a risk register that comes from right from the top, from the board. It has to be integrated as a part of the governance structure. Culture is a very key part, and that kind of also differentiates in anything else that we generally measure when it comes to governance, because culture is a very important element in terms of shared values, etc. Skills inventory and matrices that we will need to do that. So these are obviously the considerations for the governing board to implement this. So I'll summarize then in the end, and then we can take on some questions uh, after this. Uh, First is digital trust is not optional. I mean, in my view, you know, it is the next step to digital transformation. So organizations are already going through digital transformation. There are already digital experiences that their clients are having, pretty much true of all organizations. And therefore, they have to start looking at digital trustworthiness of their organization with respect to customers. And they need to prioritize at some point of time because it will create winners and losers eventually based on customer experiences around this. The second key takeaway or a summary from this is uh, governing bodies have a very important role in this. They have, or the board had charged with directing and controlling the organization, and so they are the best placed to provide guidance on digital trust related matters. So what should be done? What is the expectation? What should be the outcome so that the management can go work on this? There is a need for organization to assign accountability for digital trust. So it should not be left as, like I said, if it is everybody's job, which it is, then nobody does it. But if it is everybody's job, somebody should be overall responsible for making sure that it is getting done and we are able to monitor and track its progress through whatever tool or framework that we use or measures that we decide to go and deploy. The key to the governance of digital trust are subjects such as strategy, alignment, direction, assurance, and oversight. I mean, this is not just about digital strategy. I mean, they need to obviously support digital strategy, but they need to look at experience, reputation, brand loyalty as well. So the governance has to focus on those elements also, and not just supporting the strategy. And last but not the least, this is an iterative process. So there will be constant changes and evaluation. So the boards need to make sure that they, through the awareness that we talked about earlier, through the management systems, the management reporting, they must evaluate the strategies as well as the execution and identify areas where improvements need to happen. So again, you know, This is a very important area and topic, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to talk about this. Uh, some of this is still learning. Organizations are getting into this, but I hope you found this useful. You will find a lot of good information on this uh, on the ISACA website. I've put the website here. You will find the survey that I talked about. You will find a paper on which is a briefing for boards on that. It's a very good paper. A lot of commentary I've taken from there. There is also something like a toolkit, which again has a some kind of presentation and charts. And these are all free resources for ISACA members, but there are also other paid resources. So there is a course on digital trust introduction, and I think there's a preliminary course. There is an implementation guide on DTEF, which is a paid guide, so you could buy it or explore it, and then use that as a guidance to go through the steps of implementing digital trust in your organization. So a lot of good content on the Saka website. There are other sites too on digital trust, but very specific to implementation. I found this as the most comprehensive. So with that, I'll stop here. Silakshi, I'll pass it back to you, and we'll see if there are questions or any comments that we need to discuss. Yeah.
Yes. Anyone have any questions, please type in the QA window so we can direct them to the speaker. Have any questions? Please type in. Um, till someone type in a question. So what is the best way an organization can start if uh, they want to do a digital trust framework? How can they start? What is the initial step they can follow?
Yeah. Uh, Look, like I mentioned, if you step back. So first is of course creating knowledge and awareness. So the best way to start is if there is in-house expertise, that's fine. Otherwise, get an expert who can take you through uh, what the components of digital, and this is at a board level. So the board needs to become aware and knowledgeable about this, because they are in the direction. So the board level, it is very important to deep dive, to go into very specific, like this is just an overview and we talked about, but there's a whole level of detail. And then you can start mapping it to your own organization, and then come to some decisions on what do you want to define as your imperatives and your key factors that impact digital trust. What would you want to measure, etc. So you start at that level, from awareness at the board level, defining the expectations, the risk, and the management, and then go down the line to say, okay, now how does this framework or any other framework come in? And by the way, then somebody in the management needs to look at it and say, hey, look, we already are doing this. Where is the interlink between what we are trying to do here and what we have already done? How does this enhance? And all the discussions on ROI, etc. But starts with awareness, in my view.
Yes, yes. We have a question. What are the common factors between COBIT and DTEF?
So look, if you see in the DTF at the end, when you start to go down the hierarchy, it breaks down to some activities that need to happen. In the COB, you are mostly you using the COVID for driving all of the digital transformation in the organization in some shape or form. So you would have used that to again define some set of activities from the different initiatives and things that you're trying to do or manage to do that. So at some point at the ground level, those activities would match, right? I mean, those activities, because the activities would have a transformation effect and the activities would have a trust effect, right? To some extent. So that's why, the way Isaka looks at it is saying that, look, it should not be that you have to do one set of activities for COVID and another set of activities but you should recognize that those activities uh, would be the same, but they will have an impact on transformation elements and on trust elements. And so that's where they will start to get very interweaved and interlocked.
And we have another question. Below the board level, who is responsible for DT in an organization in general?
Yeah, I mean, I would hazard that presently in most organizations, nobody. Uh, that's something that the recommendation is that you should have somebody uh, assigned. I mean, there are pros and cons. If ideally, if you have a separate senior person made responsible, that's good. The pro and con is, you sometimes you don't have it. You align it under IT. Then the risk you run is that people may believe that this is only IT. So digital trust is only IT, and none of the other elements really matter, like culture or integrity, ethics, experiences. But or you could have it, like I said, it could be under risk, which could then be cross organization. So I guess depending on size of the organization, uh, it would depend on who you would want to give it to. But you have to call it out and say, we are going to look at our digital trustworthiness. We are going to measure it in whatever we choose as the key measurements. And he or she is the person who will be responsible for making sure that we as an organization are on track. So wherever you park it, but you have to declare it. My guess is today, most organizations don't have such a person identified. You have a CISO who's looking responsible for cybersecurity. You have a CTO who's looking for technology, but nobody has a KPI or a KRA which says, look at overall digital trustworthiness of the organization and see how it is tracking.
Okay. And the next question is, can DTEF maturity model be certified by organizations?
So I have to confess, I don't know of a particular organization who can certify it, but I did read about it that third-party certifications should be possible on DTEF. We'll have to explore a little bit more as to who's doing it now and who can do it externally, particularly. But yes, because it has a maturity level and a maturity scores, it can be certified externally. Yeah.
And one more question. Can you please tell us few good books to further study about digital trust?
I don't know any good books, but but in the course of my search on DTF and running, there are good online articles. I mean, some of the good sources, of course, like I mentioned, Isaka is, but there are good articles from McKinsey. There are some Gartner articles. There is a KPMG report that I briefly shared. There is also some Harvard thing, and there are multiple videos. Now, the little bit of complication. Sometimes people start with digital trust and then they get down into cyber security and privacy. So you have to kind of make sure you know where they have deviated from digital trust to but there is online. I do not know of any book per se on digital trust, but this DTF guide should again be a very comprehensive guide.
Okay. Yeah, that's all the questions we have. So if there are no more questions, we can end today's session. On behalf of ISACA Sri Lanka chapter, I'd like to thank Mr. Mukul Mathur for accepting the invitation to do a session for our members. It was very informative and interesting session on digital trust. Thank you all for joining us today's webinar. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.